Hello everyone and welcome to this week's tutorial. In this tutorial we are going to learn how to make ice cream inside Houdini. So without further ado, let's jump into Houdini and start this tasty tutorial. Okay, so here we are inside Houdini and there are going to be two parts for this tutorial. The first one is going to be how I created the cone, and then the second one is going to be how I created the ice cream simulation. So let's start with the cone first. I just created a grid and I made sure that it has square faces that are at the correct proportion. Then after that I created a tube, and I used that to pull in the circle out of the grid. I deleted the extra geometry. Then using a poly extrude I created those small inside faces. Then I extruded this grid-like pattern to mimic the pattern of the ice cream cone. I used the polyfill to give it some thickness, and don't worry about these errors here and there because we are going to convert this to a VDB anyway, so I ignored those. And then I transformed that extra thickness a bit so I don't get any VDB errors. And then from there I created a VDB, I smoothed it out a bit. Then here I scattered some points on the initial surface, to which then I instanced some spheres. Then I added a mountain to make them really rugged. I moved them up a bit so they only chip like the surface of the cone and don't get really deep into it and create holes or something like that. I created the VDB out of these two. Then I used the VDB combined to chip my original VDB with those small sphere particles. Then I converted back to polygons using some adaptivity so we don't have like a crazy poly count here. Then here I added some noise using a point VOP. And then using another point VOP I added some color to it, which I later used to render. And here is also like a noise with a ramp applied to it, and then in the ramp I chosen two colors, so I have some variation in color across the surface. After that I flipped it upside down and I used the reverse node to fix the normals because of the negative scale. I added some UVs just in case. And this is how I created like the base of the cone. And then in order to spin it into that shape, after trying some stuff, I went with the volume simulation. So for that I needed some custom colliders. So here again I created a grid and then cut a circle from it. I made it a little bit bigger. Then here using some Vex, you can see here I made it so it's bent downwards across the surface, sort of turned at an angle. After that I animated the bend node so it looks like this. Then I transformed it so it's back into its original position. And here I created this small wrangle, which basically what it does is it sort of scales down across X the circle, and I do that with an amount which I animated. And what I achieved with this is this cone sort of shape, which is going to help us bend the cone into position. Then I'm again transforming this to the right position. Also, to help the cone keep its shape, I created an inside and an outside cone. I merge all of these colliders together and then I'm feeding those into a volume solver. In this volume solver we have again the grid. I did those two grids separately because here I needed more resolution. Here I'm just initializing the volume cloth. I did play with the settings a little. Okay, and then here in the volume I just disable the gravity, I really increased the drag, I increased the static threshold, and then I made sure that I have enough like substeps and constraint iterations so it doesn't like pop or do anything weird. We are not going to use this simulation in the final like version of it. This is just to bend it in shape. So yeah, basically after running the simulation you will see that the cone is going to be bent like this. Okay, and now as you can see it really got that nice ice cream cone shape. Then I used the volume post process to smooth it out and make sure it's cleaner and more usable for the point deform we are going to do. Here I'm just time shifting to frame 90 where the simulation ends, and I'm basically using this as a frame hold to only have frame 90 from here downwards. Here I'm caching it on a file so I don't have to wait for this to sim every time the file gets open. Here I'm doing some transformations and some other stuff in order to get this point deform to work. Basically what I did was I flipped this upside down and then I got it into position so it overlaps with the cone shape. And now here what I'm doing is blend shape, so I can like animate this the way I want. And after this blend shape, because I had a little bit of like self collision here, I animated a small soft transform to get rid of it. And that is basically just manually selecting those points here and animating the Y value a bit. Okay, now all of those get fed into a point deform with the default settings, and we have this nice animation of the cone getting bent into shape. From here I have like a static version which goes into my simulation as a collider, and then here I got it into its final position for rendering, and then here I animated it a bit more so it sort of spins before getting into place, and here is just some alignment so it's framed right for the camera and it matches the simulation I did. So here is the cone part. Now for the second part we are going to look at how we are going to simulate the ice cream. Okay, so now for the ice cream, the first thing I did was I've imported the ice cream cone here, so I have it as a collider, and then to have my collisions run faster in the simulation I converted it to a VDB, which I'm also going to reference as a collision volume inside the simulation. Then for the source of the ice cream I just created a circle first with 10 divisions. Then I selected only the even ones and scaled them inward so I get this star shape. Then I've scaled it down. I gave it some thickness. And this scale is animated at the end, so we get that sort of cone shape at the end. Here I created a custom attribute which then I've used along with these expressions in order to have it spin and so I can control like the radius at which it spins. But you can always like hand animate this, you don't have to get this crazy. I did this just because I'm usually too lazy to hand animate stuff, and I'd rather write an expression than to animate something by hand, but that's me. Okay, after that I've got it to its final position compared to like the ice cream cone, and I've also scaled it up a little bit so the cone is not that flat and it's like scaled and taller. After that, really importantly, I added the time blend here, because what I ended up doing, so I don't have like any weird stepping in the simulation, was I needed like 10 substeps, and this makes sure that for each substep you have like a new position from the emitter, and you're not just like the emitter is not just like stuck in position for like the whole frame, and it moves with the substeps. After that, here is just the basic flip source, and here I'm initializing some velocity downwards, and then I'm doing some initial viscosity, which we are going to then manipulate in the simulation to have it sit still as it gets poured on the cone. Okay, now inside the simulation here there's nothing crazy. I did end up using quite some resolution, and I feel that we need even some more, because I messed with like the meshing quite a lot, and we still have some like subtle flickering here and there, which I think the best way to fix would be to just increase the resolution. Here is just the collision for the ice cream cone with its mode set to volume sample and then pointed towards that VDB. So again, we have like faster, better collisions. Here I'm just sourcing the particles and the initial surface for the flip, and I'm only emitting for like 60 frames, and after that I'm letting the simulation like sit still there for a couple of frames more. I have gravity, of course. I have some drag, which is on the default settings, and inside the flip solver I did increase the max substeps to 10, because again I don't want any like stepping forming in there, and this was the best way to avoid that. Alternatively, you could have like trailed the emission. That would have been more efficient and faster, but it did turn up with some weird results, so I went this way instead. In the particle motion tab, I'm adding some age just in case I need it. Then I'm receding particles, and here is just the default settings for the receding. I'm also applying particle separation. This is really important if you want to have like really smooth meshes. Again, for having like really smooth meshes, make sure you change the velocity transfer from the default flip splashy to epic, which is going to be more smoother and give you like nicer results, which are going to mesh smoothly. And I've also in the collisions tab increased the surface extrapolation, so it has like more surface area to collide with. I just enabled viscosity and enabled viscosity by attribute, and then here I enabled OpenCL, so it uses my graphics card, and it's a bit faster that way. But be careful if you increase like the particle count too much, because you might run out of VRAM depending on what GPU you are running. So if that happens, turn this off and wait for your CPU to do the job slower but more stable. In order to get that variable viscosity, I just used the guess linear combination, which I set with destination as viscosity on the geometry tab, and then here I'm adding the viscosity, I'm adding 100 for each frame that gets passed on. So like the older particles get more viscosity, whereas the newer ones, since are emitted later, are getting less of this viscosity and they accumulate it over time. And for this to work, make sure that you set the default operation here to set always. And this is the result. Then in order to mesh this, and I'm not 100% happy with the way it meshed, because again we have some subtle flickering here and there, but I do feel that we might need some extra resolution for that, but that might also be fixed with the voxel scale. As you can see, I've already dropped it down from the default 0.75 to 0.55, and then also to get like more detail and definition, I decreased the influence scale of the particles. Then again, to prevent flickering, I set the adaptivity to 0 here, and also to get this to be smoother, I set the smoothing here to 30, making sure that I also enable the dilating and eroding, so we don't lose volume while smoothing. Okay, after that I cached the mesh, and here I'm time shifting it with like 72 frames, so we only get IceCream after the cone has settled into its final shape. And then here, so I don't get an error because we don't have any frames before frame 72, I'm just switching to a null, and I animated that null to switch to this only after frame 72, and that takes care of like the errors of missing files in the cache frame. And this is it. I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing. A really special thank you to everyone on Patreon who keeps supporting me there. You guys rock and are awesome. And before the tutorial next week, looking forward to seeing you on our Discord server, and looking forward to seeing you next week, and bye bye.